Sami, I gotta tell you, man, that I love doing this podcast with you.
For sure, Ian. It's so much fun. To be honest, I've never thought I would be a podcast host. So thanks for pushing me to do this with you.
You're welcome. But also, we gotta thank Anchor FM.
Absolutely. It's everything we need in one place. And they also help us distribute our podcast on Spotify, Apple, and all the other platforms.
It's freaking awesome. So easy.
So for all of you out there listening, if you're like us and have been thinking of hosting your own show, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Hello everyone, my name is Sami Merdinian, and together with Ian Loew, we would like to welcome you to another episode of Down the Pit. Whether you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your preferred platform, we ask you to please take a second and subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. A lot goes into bringing Down the Pit to you, and we would love to know your thoughts on how we're doing. To become a Down the Pit supporter for as little as 99 cents a month, please visit our website, downthepit.com. We're also on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at downthepit_pod, and you can find us also on Facebook at Down the Pit. Today we have a very special episode. We will be talking to world-acclaimed pianist Philip Edward Fisher. Born in England and starting playing the piano at a relatively late age of 9, Philip will tell us about his upbringings in his city of Birmingham, how his love for music and piano started growing, a very, very interesting story on how one day suddenly everything clicked. He's moved to New York, winning the concerto competition at Juilliard, his New York debut, and so much more. Without further ado, here it is. Philip Edward Fisher, and the first part of our conversation with him.
We would like to thank our corporate sponsor, US Pave. For any and all your commercial and residential paving needs, please visit us at uspave.com. US Pave, the national paving company. Hey Philip, let me start off by saying your full name. Philip Edward Fisher. What a name. Sounds so royal.
That was done with aplomb, Ian. That was that was perfect. It does sound royal, and it's funny you say that because somebody who will remain nameless actually recommended that I use those two names because they said it'll never hurt to have the names of two princes in there.
That's awesome. Second, part of what I heard is that you're a huge soccer fan and you love the Aston Villa Football Club.
Okay, I got to stop you right there. That's almost libelous what you just said. Birmingham City through and through. You just mentioned the worst possible team for me.
Oh
you
boy!
Get your information, Ian.
No, I'm not gonna throw anybody under the bus. That's not my style.
Sabotaging this already before we even started. Thanks for mentioning soccer. Just after the Euro final, I'm still recovering.
Yeah. Did you live near the stadium in Birmingham?
I actually lived a little closer to the West Bromwich Albion Stadium, to the point where actually we would occasionally get their soccer balls would come over into our back garden because they'd be training a few fences away and the goalie would just kick something. I still have it back home. I still got the West Bromwich Albion initials on it.
Oh, cool.
But I was pretty close to the Birmingham City venue, and
Did you go to the games when you were a kid?
I didn't go to so many. I went to one or two, but it was Birmingham City was the family team. You couldn't support Aston Villa. It's just that sort of
a sacrilege.
Yeah, sacrilege, exactly.
Do they have good deals for children, like meals wise? Like you get 2-for-1 hot dog nights or something like that?
In Birmingham City, you might get 2-for-1 punch in the face, but
So they drink beers. You're saying there?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you might get. Yeah, exactly. You got that right. You might get a 2-for-1 carling or something.
Let's start talking about music.
There we go.
What's that?
So you started playing piano at age 9?
Yeah, thereabouts. Yeah, I think 8.5, 9, something like that.
Which, in the classical world, I guess, is considered kind of late.
Yeah, it was kind of late. I mean, the story goes that I'm the youngest of 7 kids. My dad, who was a piano teacher and performer, and so stopped performing at a certain time and just used to teach privately at home, schools, all sorts of things. I guess he sort of made the rest of my siblings play, and then by the time he got to me, he'd given up trying. So I actually honestly had to sort of bug him for lessons, because there was a point where I was like, why did everybody else get to play and I didn't?
Felt left out.
Yeah, I felt left out, and sort of bugged him for it, and he resisted and eventually sort of relented grudgingly. And then it just sort of happened from there. It took a while though. For a year I didn't show much talent. I was very close to quitting, and then it just suddenly sort of happened very quickly. But
And then later on, do you feel like you had to catch up in the first few years to like what other kids were doing?
yeah, that's a really interesting question actually. You mean musically or?
Yeah, just technically, musically.
Technically it was sort of everything just happened really quickly. I mean the story is really strange because I literally couldn't read music for a year. I mean and my dad was still writing the note names over the notes in like John Thompson Piano Book 1 or something, you know. And I was actually really, really close to quitting. And there came a day where I just thought to myself, this has to be easier than I think it is to read music. And it actually did just fall into place in my mind of how everything related, and a certain direction on the page was a certain direction on the keyboard. And I went into the music room and started reading Beethoven and Chopin, and my dad almost had a heart attack because it was literally one day struggling to play John Thompson Piano Book 1.
Oh, something clicked.
Something clicked. Is very strange. I've never quite worked out exactly what it was. And then I was performing like a year later, and so it actually just happened really quickly. If I felt like I had to catch up on anything, it was probably maybe some technical things, but probably more sort of emotional, musical things that kind of got left behind. You know, if you sort of you feel like you've jumped a couple of hurdles, but other things maybe take a little bit longer to develop. So I sort of felt that a bit later, but yeah, it was just a kind of crazy head start really. Didn't look back.
That's very unique.
Yeah, it's a weird story. I haven't told it a great deal actually. I think this might be one of the first times I've actually related that story in an interview, because it was just kind of strange. I didn't quite know what to make of it at the time, and I sort of it was unusual. I was almost a little bit embarrassed to tell it, but now I'm just owning it.
Is it a sign of a wunderkind?
I wouldn't want to say that. It was maybe a weird kind, but it was a sign of something. I don't know. I still don't fully understand it. It just sort of happened that way.
So prior to playing, did you do any other activities as a kid? Any martial arts, or you lived near the soccer field?
Yeah, you did martial arts for defense where I grew up. But I mean, actually, I was a really keen snooker fan, or billiards. I don't know how popular snooker is really in the US, but I grew up playing snooker. And I actually really wanted to be a professional snooker player, but I just knew I wasn't good enough. So I would love to have gone that route if I could have. And I still play to this day, and now I have friends in that field who are professionals. So even more had it confirmed that there was no way I was good enough when I play these guys. It's like spend your whole day pulling the balls out of the pocket. So yeah.
So you mentioned that your siblings all tried playing piano?
Yeah, piano. The brother who's closest to me in age, Alex, was a very good percussionist, and he played in the local youth orchestra. There's even a recording of us when I was playing the Grieg piano concerto, and he was the percussionist in the orchestra, you know, doing that timpani roll at the beginning. And then he moved on to other things. My eldest brother was a very good pianist, and also just sort of, you know, eventually drifted away into other things.
Was the music coming from other generations?
Yeah, it was definitely on my dad's side. I think my dad inherited the piano from his father. I wasn't one of those kids who was like picking out tunes on the piano. I didn't have this kind of incredible ear, you know. I didn't show that at 4 or 5. I was doing other stuff. But when I look back on it, every Saturday morning I'd wake up and my dad would be teaching, so I was constantly hearing music all the time. So I think I had that sort of memory for it imprinted in my brain, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you have like a specific story that reeled you in? Because I know you said that, you know, one day you just started playing Beethoven and Mozart and all this other stuff. But
I think that the story that reeled me into loving music was just a certain record that I heard. My brother had a huge record collection, vinyl collection, you know. You know, I'd always listened to pop music up until then, and I just pulled out this record. It was Mozart Piano Concerto number 19, Rudolf Serkin, George Sell was conducting, Cleveland Orchestra. I remember it. I can even remember the cover, everything. And I just put it on, and I remember just being like, wow, what is this? You know, it's just sort of like transfixed. So that was probably the event where I discovered my love for classical music, for sure.
How old were you?
I would say probably around 10. Okay. I'd been playing for a while, but hadn't yet sort of like really achieved anything. But then I just remember hearing that record and just thinking, this is unbelievable. And then I actually couldn't bring myself to learn that piece for years. Because I just wanted to sort of preserve that memory of it being something special and not get stuck in the grind of having to learn it, you know. And then I did eventually perform it in Long Island some years ago and actually directed it from the keyboard as well. So that was a pretty cool moment because I still held on to that memory.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like a test where I was sort of like, can I play this and still keep that freshness?
Yeah.
You know, and I think I did. I didn't fall out of love with it, so you know, it's a good sign.
So, Philip, tell us about how you won a scholarship to study at the Purcell School of Music in London.
Oh yeah, God, this is going back. This is like you testing my memory here.
We've done our due diligence.
Trying to show my age. Yeah, so actually that was kind of an interesting story because up until then I just attended what we call a state school in the UK, what would be called a public school here. Weirdly, you know, the private system in the UK is called public, and for whatever reason, yeah. So I just went to a regular state school in Birmingham, quite a rough school. There's no music going on there. I remember we used to try and practice during the lunchtime periods, and the instruments were terrible, and you know, so I think there was a point where I sort of had a feeling that I had to seek out a different experience. Mm-hmm. And one day I was just rifling through this magazine. It was like BBC Music Magazine or something like that. I don't remember exactly what. And I just saw this ad, Purcell School of Music. There was a picture of it, and it was this like beautiful, picturesque place in North London. And I just said, I want to go there. This is like, as soon as I saw it, I was like, I want to go there. And I showed it to my parents, and they were like, oh, this is probably very expensive. You know, it's going to be tough to get in, blah, blah, blah. They only had like 160 pupils, very small school. And I said, I don't care. I'm putting in the application. You know, I really want to go and audition. So I went for the audition, met with the head at the time, and he said, well, we'd love to have you in the school. He said, we also have a policy that whoever is accepted should not be able to not attend because of financial restrictions or whatever. So he said, we always find the money. Mm-hmm. And so that was pretty amazing. At the time, the government had something called the Music and Ballet Scheme, mm-hmm. which was to basically pay the tuition of, you know, musically gifted or people gifted in dance. So I got a full ride from the government, to the point where I also got a stipend to buy music every year. Right. I mean, I think at the time, if I remember rightly, it was about £15,000 the tuition, and this was back in the 90s.
Yeah, that's quite a
you
bit
know,
of money.
so it was actually, I think it was more expensive than Eton and Harrow School. Wow. You know, those like top public schools officially. Very few people were paying full whack there. Yeah, I think I'd say the majority were on at least partial mm-hmm. to full government scholarships. So that was an amazing opportunity. Just completely changed my life, because then I was with people who were as talented, more talented, constantly challenged, constantly feeling like you've got to, you know, develop and keep up. So it kind of gave me an insight into the reality of the business, yeah, exactly, and your peers and all this sort of stuff. So
that's awesome. And from there, you went straight to the Royal Academy of Music?
I was already studying at the Royal Academy of Music. They had a program called the Intermediate Academy, mm-hmm. which is a bit like pre-college here. So I would go and have my lessons with an academy teacher who was Christopher Elton, who was the head of keyboard. Even when I was at school in Birmingham, I would take one day off school every week and travel on Tuesdays for my lessons. And that was another reason why I wanted to move to boarding school in London. So it was just so much easier. Yeah. So yeah, once I got out of Purcell School, I transitioned into Royal Academy of Music.
Any fun or embarrassing stories from the academy?
Probably too many to go into, and maybe a bit too embarrassing. Probably some concerning our mutual colleagues.
No, you can't say that. We're gonna have to go down this road.
Yeah, it was a great time. Had a blast there.
So you eventually end up at the Juilliard School.
Yes.
With the Julius Isserlis Scholarship.
Yeah, it was all a bit kind of roundabout way that I had to make everything work, because I had it in my mind when I was coming to the end of my undergrad at the Royal Academy of Music, and I thought I'd love to go abroad somewhere, mm-hmm. you know, just to taste something different. And the Royal Academy had an exchange program, so somebody from the school abroad would come there, and you basically just switch places. Mm-hmm. And I knew a student of my teacher at the time had done the same thing to the Juilliard School, told me how great it was. I happened to study with the teacher I eventually ended up studying with, Joseph Kalixine. She loved him, and so I thought, okay, that's where I want to go. So I knew that that's what I wanted to do. Then my teacher just said, oh, there's this, you know, competition. It's not really a competition, but it's more of an audition taking place for this scholarship, which is a very large financial scholarship. And he said, just randomly put in the application, went and played the audition and won the money. So I remember that it stipulated that you had to study abroad for 2 consecutive years. I came to the exchange program, but which was only 1 year. So then I had to figure out how to get this consecutive year going. So I ended up studying privately, and I worked at Juilliard as an accompanist for a year before eventually transitioning into the master's program. But I literally just got up one day and came to New York because I applied for the exchange program through sending a recording. I had never been to the States. I'd never been to New York. One day I just woke up and I was like, oh, I'm going to New York today. I still remember the days in the cab and coming out of the Lincoln Tunnel from Newark Airport and looking around and being like, what have I let myself in for here?
There was obviously a culture shock. Were you shocked in comparison of the education between the United States and the UK?
I wouldn't say shocked. I definitely noticed a difference. The only way I could describe it in a way is I think Juilliard School felt like it was more tapped into like the professional life in that kind of very competitive way. Whereas at the Royal Academy of Music, perhaps there was that kind of feeling of nurturing your development like within the walls of the school. And this might just be my own perception because this is kind of what I came here for, I guess. But I saw it as a gateway to sort of make those professional contacts. And I always felt that Juilliard sort of really gives you that idea of how competitive it is and what you have to do to survive. That was probably the biggest difference I felt.
But nothing in the actual education side besides like music, how it's perceived.
Yeah, I would say it was quite similar. There was access to King's College of London through the Royal Academy of Music, so you could do more sort of extracurricular stuff. I remember taking a film course, doing all that sort of stuff, and it was all done with teachers from King's College University. I felt it to be slightly broader.
Yeah.
And then when I came to Juilliard, it was very much just sort of like really into the nitty-gritty of music and everything that surrounds it.
So while at Juilliard, you won the concerto competition with Rachmaninoff third.
Yep.
Piano concerto. And I was there in the audience. It was the first time I heard you play. And I'm going to quote my sister, Solange, here, where she said, and I think she has told you this, I've never had tears by listening to a pianist before.
Oh my God.
And let's make it clear that these tears
they were good.
The good kind.
Okay, that was my next question. Just getting worried there for a second.
So you have a rare ability to transmit so much emotions while performing. What is going on inside your brain, your soul, or how would you describe what goes on inside of you?
That is a really challenging question. I wouldn't say I'm completely sure, and I think part of the trick is actually not to be completely sure. I think if you try to sort of rationalize it too much, you almost lose something. I've always had a feeling that I don't actually try to transmit emotions on stage. I sometimes feel like if you try too much, it almost has the reverse effect. Yeah. The analogy I've often used is, when you have a really powerful dream and it really sticks in your mind, and to you it was just incredibly important, and then you try to describe it to someone and they're just like, what are you even talking about? But to you somehow it was like this incredibly meaningful dream. I always sort of think that way, like if you try to transmit something specific, you almost lose the audience because every individual is just going to have a completely different take on what they're hearing. So I always feel like I don't want to force sadness, wistfulness, nostalgia, all that stuff. I mean, I feel that stuff, but it's not like in a really concrete sense. It's more just like drawing on everything that you've experienced. And I try not to get too emotional myself on stage. I sort of feel like that's the audience's privilege. Although having said that, when I first set foot on stage again after this pandemic, not like after this pandemic because it's not really over, but it was the first time I was really back on stage, and it was in Florida with the Northwest Florida Symphony Orchestra, Rachmaninoff Paganini variations, and I got really emotional on stage, I've got to say, because it was just...
You have to stop playing?
Well, not quite, but it was almost like that. I was kind of glad I was wearing a mask. Oh. And that was kind of a really interesting experience because I sort of hadn't really had that feeling before. And I don't know if it changed anything for the audience or not, but...
What did the review say?
Yeah, I haven't read it. That's a really good... I might have to go back and see. That would be an interesting experiment. I think you almost kind of have to let your subconscious take over. And I think your subconscious transmits the emotions in a sense. If you try to really direct it with your conscious mind, I'm not sure that really works.
And when the concert is over, do you feel like you remember every note you played, or it's kind of like...
Only if they're the wrong notes.
Oh,
It's
which you never have. So.
Well, yeah, of course. I definitely remember certain feelings. The main thing I know when I come off stage is I usually know by how I feel physically if it's gone well or not.
Mm-hmm.
Like if it's gone well, I feel this kind of like sense of wholeness, if that makes any sense, like a warmth in your body, like you just feel physically kind of connected. And usually, I was like, yeah, that went well. Like I know I was in the zone because I didn't know it at the time. It's like if you think you know it at the time, you're probably not in it. Yeah. If you know what I mean. So absolutely. Yeah, usually that tells me afterwards. And then someone comes up and says, that really sucked, by the way, and then you're like, okay.
So, Philip, looking back at your schooling, I know you didn't answer this for the Purcell School of Music question, but what has been your best memory, would you say?
There might be a few best memories. I might not be able to narrow it down to one. In terms of musical memories or just a night out?
Both. I mean, both. They all go hand in hand.
Yeah.
That could be the reason why you played the Rachmaninoff concerto so well.
Well, funnily enough, I was going to say that I think that performance was one of my best memories. Just everything surrounding that performance, because I literally just come to the US. I didn't expect to win that competition. You know, I was here as an exchange student. I didn't, it's kind of.
You didn't know if there were politics involved.
Yeah, you just never know like how it's going to pan out, and it just happened that I recently learned the Rachmaninoff, and I'd had an experience of doing it in London. I hadn't performed it, but I'd done this kind of workshop with the youth orchestra where we were just working on it. So I sort of knew it inside out. So I thought it was just happenstance that happened to be the concerto they're doing. So I thought, why not? I'll just do it. I'll never forget the feeling in Paul Hall at Juilliard of the actual competition night itself, because I'd never felt like support from people like that strong. It's like the audience and all my friends that I made, and that was actually really an amazing feeling, because
the explosion after you were
done. It was just like you're in this environment at Juilliard School, which comes with this reputation of being this almost cutthroat place, and I actually just hadn't felt that kind of like warm, real support from people. That was pretty amazing, from like colleagues and friends. And then similarly, when it came to the actual performance, I just remember the same feeling. You're working with an orchestra where so many of the people in the orchestra are your friends. So many people in the audience are your friends. It just gives it this extra edge, this extra energy. So that's a really good memory. Do
you have a recording or a video from that concert?
I have a recording, nice. Which I'm not really allowed to do much with, I think, for union rules or whatever. But I listen to it from time to time and just remember. I can even, I hear like certain solos coming out, and I remember who it was, like who the concertmaster was, or who the first trumpet was, or the first clarinet, and you hear these solos, and it's cool. It's just it's like that connection where the music just is so like indelibly connected to the memory that it will always recall it. So that's a really great memory.
Awesome.
And now your worst enemy. Excuse me. Now your worst memory, not enemy.
Worst enemy, yeah.
Your worst memory, Philip. The flight to the U.S.
Well, yeah. Do you know that story?
I have no idea.
There is a story involving a flight that probably is my worst memory. When I came to Juilliard, it was 2001, and I had to go back to Scotland. I had a performance there on the 10th, and then I was travelling back on the 11th. Obviously, that September the 11th, 2001.
Oh, man.
And I remember, I got stranded in Newfoundland, small island off the coast of Canada. I was there for just over a week. I don't think I made it back to New York until the following Monday. Of course, personally, the reason it's the worst memory is just because it was just such a terrible day for just so many reasons. It wasn't personally affecting other than inconvenience, but obviously what it represented was just awful.
Yeah.
So I remember that feeling just so strongly. I even remember, I think part of the reason why that Rachmaninoff performance was so powerful, because it was so soon afterwards. I think it was the following January or February, I don't remember quite which one it was, but just like the whole atmosphere in New York was so different, and I think music started to mean like even more. So it's kind of weird how the worst memory and the best memory are kind of interconnected.
Yeah. And
they can kind of affect one another. But yeah, I'd say that was a more flippant worst memory. Is probably just a memory lapse. If you're talking about an on-stage experience, I think that's every musician's worst fear, but hey, there's definitely far more important.
Performing Bach.
It was Mozart.
Mozart.
Yeah, it's usually
19
Mozart. It's
concerto?
no, it was 23rd. No, it was the 23rd concerto. I think I was maybe 14 or 15, and it was just like the most fleeting of memory lapses. But it was like one of these ones where you're in the exposition, but you think you're in the recapitulation. So it's like your physical memory goes one way. So I remember it being a big lesson because I was kind of like, oh yeah, you can't just rely on physical memory. You've also got to rely on just knowing the piece, like where you are in the piece, because it is usually either Bach or Mozart, right? It's because there's always a turn where it like goes off in the new direction, but your fingers remember the previous. So yeah, that was one of the worst on-stage memories.
So you pretty much memorize all your music when you perform?
Yeah, if it's solo or concerto, yeah, almost always.
It doesn't matter if it's like contemporary.
I try to memorize contemporary as well if I can. Just personally, I feel like much more freedom when I'm playing by memory. It's sometimes I find like if I know a piece quite well, it's actually distracting to have the music in front of me because I'll drift away from the music and start playing by memory, and then my eye will go to somewhere on the page and I'll be somewhere different. So if I can play from memory, I prefer that, because if I'm going to play from music, I want to be stuck to it in a sense. If I'm playing chamber music, I always use music. If it's really complex and I've had very short time to learn it, I'll use, I'm not afraid to use music, and I think it's less of a big deal these days.
Absolutely.
Like I think people do. It's not that kind of like sport element anymore where people are like, you have to play by memory. So it's not a pressure that I feel from outside. It's more just a personal thing. Like I just feel that sort of more freedom. Yeah.
How often do you go back home, and how do you balance your time and your career here in the US and Europe?
Yeah, well, pre-pandemic, it was really a lot. Like I was going back 3 to 4 times a year sometimes.
So you probably have more miles on your credit card than Sami does?
No, I know about that actually. That might be a bit of a competition.
Yeah.
As
all the flying he's done with
status is very important to me.
Yeah, exactly. All the flying he's done with Sybarite 5, I think he's probably caught up with me. But yeah, I was going back, very often. I would often do work at the Royal Academy of Music, performances. So that was really just like flying back and forth. This has been an extremely weird time for everybody, but it's been the longest time I've been in one place for, I'm going to guess, 20 years. Well, yeah, at least 20 years. Honestly, like to be in the same place for basically a year and a half with maybe 1 or 2 like short trips, it's like really unusual. And at first I almost freaked out about it. I just wasn't used to it. I was so like hooked on that sort of lifestyle of just being in different places. And then after a while I got kind of used to it, and now I'm a bit scared about going back to the other one. It's like getting off a treadmill and then you're expected to jump like right back on. But I think things are just going to come back so gradually that it almost just by virtue of the way it is, it's kind of like easing us back into it. But yeah, so I did go back and forth a lot, hoping to go back soon, but it's sort of open-ended, right? It's not quite sure. I do have certain potential projects coming up. So
awesome. Before we move on to our next section, I got to ask you one question.
Sure.
Does London have the best fish and chips?
Well, maybe not London necessarily.
Okay. We've got some shots fired.
A favorite spot that you have found?
Actually, there was a great place in Birmingham. I remember it's just a local place to me,
That's
which
the
I
best.
used to go to a lot as a kid. Yeah, and it wasn't like one of the super like fish and chips has really changed now. It's almost like a high end meal now. You get, especially in London, you go to these like what you would sort of say fancy fish and chip places and spend £50 on fish and chips, and
you spend that much money on burgers here too.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's the same kind of thing. It's kind of like how diners in New York now. It's like you spend a lot of money, right, on a diner meal. It's not like a cheap thing anymore. And I sort of feel that way about fish and chips. But I still remember the sort of local ones I would go to as a kid, and somehow they would just get it exactly right. But there's a secret which I only just found out recently, and it's in the vinegar, because they don't use actual vinegar. And I only found this out recently. They use something
I'm scared to ask you what it is.
They use something called a non-brewed condiment, and it's actually fake vinegar, and it has this almost like caramelish taste to it, which is like really addictive.
I'm guessing it's less healthy than vinegar.
Yeah, I think so. And you cannot buy it really unless you go to the fish and chip shops and say, "Will you sell me
Wow.
one of your non-brewed condiment, and they'll sell it to you for like a couple of pounds or something. I think they've tried to keep it a secret because it's a bit addictive.
Now it's out.
Now it's out. So listen, anyone out there planning to open up a fish and chip shop in New York, try to get your hands on the non-brewed condiment. Get your customers addicted.
Nice.
There it is. So we're going to move to our first espresso section. Just the first word or words that come to your mind.
Okay.
You ready?
Yeah.
So favorite instrument to collaborate with?
Cello.
Favorite food?
Steak.
Not fish and chips, okay.
Not fish
All
and
right.
chips, no.
Favorite restaurant?
Maria on Central Park South.
Favorite conductor?
Carlo Maria Giulini.
Favorite soccer club?
Birmingham City.
Favorite soccer player?
I say this through gritted teeth, Maradona.
Favorite chamber music piece?
Brahms B major trio.
Favorite piano solo?
Liszt B minor sonata.
Favorite composer, alive or not?
That one is actually really hard, but I'd probably go with Beethoven.
Favorite music performance you've had?
My New York debut, Rachmaninoff Third Concerto, Juilliard Symphony.
Favorite TV series?
Breaking Bad.
Favorite movie?
Bullworth.
Favorite actress?
Scarlett Johansson.
Favorite English politician?
That one really is going side. Can there be a favourite? I don't know.
Henry VIII.
Clement Attlee.
Favorite hobby?
Billiards. Snooker.
Favorite cartoon when you were a kid?
The Roadrunner.
Favorite country to visit?
Japan.
Our audience's favorite, tell us a useless talent you have.
I can fold up one of my ears into the shape of a tiny parcel.
There it is. I'm going to need proof of this.
Just don't put a link to that, like no video.
Yeah, no video.
I was ready to make a TikTok.
Oh, yeah, we could do TikTok, actually, yeah.
If you want to know about Philip's breaking moment of his career, the COVID variations and upcoming recording projects, and so much more, please tune in next week. But before we go, we want to leave you with some music. This is Petite Suite, Movement 7, Nocturne by Rimsky-Korsakov, recorded by Philip for Chandos, featuring the music of The Mighty Handful. Enjoy, and let's meet again next week. Thanks so much for sticking around until the end and allowing us to be a part of your day. We don't have all the solutions to the world's problems, but classical music for sure can help solve a few of them. Please follow us on social media, and we cannot wait for you to join us next time.